The other day, I finally beat my first run in the absolutely brutally difficult turn-based RPG, Darkest Dungeon 2. Seriously, don't play that game unless you hate yourself. It had taken me about 20 hours to do this, and when it finally happened, it took every ounce of restraint I had to not scream and wake up my two young kids who were sleeping in the other room. How does a video game elicit such a reaction from a grown-ass man? Why do so many other gamers yell and scream and celebrate as if they won $1 million in lottery when all they've done is just complete one part, one level, one simple boss of a video game? I think the answer lies in a very specific word. It's an old word, mostly forgotten in a modern world: apprenticeship. The first apprenticeships began some hundreds or thousands of years ago, where a master craftsman or woman would employ young amateurs in exchange for room and board and teach them how to one day become a master themselves. Long before the white-collar work environments in our post-industrial revolution world, laborers and young people across the globe would enter into this training with a master of that trade: blacksmithing, cooking, carpentry, tailoring, and dozens of other respectable professions that society heavily depended on. Apprentices were seen for what they were: beginners with little value to offer in the world at that moment, yet vitally important and held in high regard because of what they promised to become. Masters were difficult leaders, but they were absolutely committed to training, coaching, teaching, and guiding their apprentices for many years through difficult training regimens. Apprenticeship, as you can imagine, was not an easy road. Masters were often exacting taskmasters, at once burdened with both the expectation of regularly producing flawless, world-class creations themselves, while also training undisciplined, talentless youngsters as they learned difficult, complicated skills. Apprenticeship usually began around 12 years old and took many years of toil, hard work, and rigorous training for any apprentice to achieve anything close to the illustrious rank of master, essentially setting up themselves and their family for life with their in-demand skills and experience. Now, what does all this have to do with Darkest Dungeon 2? I think a lot of people nowadays actually wouldn't mind some kind of training like this. A built-in mentor whose job was to train you, teach you, correct you, and transfer their highly sought-after lifelong experiences so you could be better someday, so you could be needed someday. Sure, it'd be grueling and difficult and exhausting, but by the end, you'd know you would be an expert with highly specialized, in-demand knowledge that the world had a huge need and respect for. Quick reminder before I go on, I make a lot of videos like this, and if you want YouTube to show you more of them, just click that subscribe button. Thanks. Sadly, I bet that most of you watching this would agree, there are very few opportunities for you to become an apprentice nowadays, to have a master guide you and teach you and have someone commit to you. I would sure say so. I graduated college over a decade ago, and looking back, it's hard to think of any one person who could fit this idea of a mentor or a master for me. On the contrary, I've had bad bosses that were unequivocally bad. People who were immature, manipulative, petty, self-centered, oblivious, greedy, and stunningly short-sighted. I know this isn't the case for everyone, and there are some of you watching who have actually had the privilege of working with truly great leaders who took you under their wing and thoughtfully, selflessly decided to help you. But I gotta tell you, that is not the norm. It's the exception to the rule. Finding a master is hard, and most of us don't get the chance. We need to teach ourselves and do the best with what we're given when no one wants to take us on as an apprentice. Today, Gen Z is opting for trade schools and modern-day apprenticeship jobs in record numbers, as opposed to taking the traditional route of going to a wildly expensive college with no guarantee of a job, followed by spending years working for minimum wage jobs with no job security, even if you do manage to even get one. It's not difficult to see the draw of apprenticeship. And that night, when I beat my first run in Darkest Dungeon 2, I think I got a bit better of an idea about why these younger people are choosing the apprenticeship route. Yes, it can be brutally difficult, but also euphorically rewarding if you put the time in. Roguelike video games give you the opportunity to experience this apprenticeship to mastery evolution. And even if it's just a video game, you may be surprised to learn how many real-life skills these games teach you, and how they can help guide you, train you, and teach you to become a more focused, patient, poised, and implacable person long after you turn the game off. In roguelike games like Darkest Dungeon, you start with nothing. Just a tiny little band of pathetic little fighters with no special skills, tons of disadvantages, and barely enough resources to survive even your first few battles before you get killed or have to retreat and start over. But with each new run, you get more skills, more resources, more experiences, and lessons about how to survive the brutal, unforgiving path laid before you. Over time, you manage to travel farther and farther, getting stronger, surviving more battles, collecting more precious resources, and eventually even reaching major checkpoints on the road, like I did, than your initial little party of babies could ever hope to achieve. Roguelikes force you to become an apprentice, where the game is your unforgiving, relentless master. It gives you the chance to become a master yourself and offers you the chance to learn, grow, and develop both in-game and real-life skills, if you're willing to put in the time. For instance, in order to survive and beat a run of Darkest Dungeon 2, you have to basically memorize every enemy from every single region, every one of their attacks, their weaknesses, their resistances, then properly plan for that specific scenario. Over time, your battle plan is almost entirely tailored for specific enemies and encounters, and your preparation and memorization are critical skills that can give you a much needed edge in battle. Anyone who's played any Dark Souls game already knows this. Enemies have the most specific attack patterns with the most precise hitboxes and are so brutally difficult that defeating them essentially means you have to become one with them, knowing their patterns and proclivities and tendencies and conditions so intimately that you could defeat them in your sleep 100 times over. And when you finally do, well, it's one of the most rewarding experiences in video games, period. One case comes to mind is the world famous Let Me Solo Her guy in Elden Ring. You probably heard of him. A good Samaritan player you can summon that beat Melania, Blade of Mikola so many times, so perfectly, he needed virtually nothing else than 2 swords, a pot, and a loincloth to defeat her well over 1,000 times in a row. He had become a true master of this one specific skill, and the game developers even sent him a real-life sword and plaque acknowledging his monumental achievement. In the Emmy award-winning TV show The Bear, a show about what it's like to run a world-class fine dining restaurant, the chefs in the kitchen are hell-bent on earning a Michelin star. The great signifier of a truly best-in-class restaurant, the ultimate proof that you are among the handful of people in your profession who are literally the best in the world. There are only a handful of food critics and reviewers in the world that are good enough to even discern which restaurants and chefs are deserving of the award. Thus, the dance between chef and reviewer is among the most intimate in the world. In some ways, more intimate than any other relationship these people could have with anyone else. Both are extremely specialized masters of their craft, a yin and a yang, and each understands the other's motivations and efforts in a way that no one else in the world, a best friend, a spouse, even a kid, could ever understand. And winning a Michelin star might seem like a cool achievement for the average eater who doesn't really get what that means and what it took to achieve that. But for those who know what it took, who know what the award truly means, they know it's an accomplishment that is so grand in scale, their grandkids' will be told the story. The same principle can be seen in many video games, especially in roguelikes, where you have to work so hard, failing over and over, losing and being forced to learn, adapt, change, grow, and admit you're still not good enough, humbly reinvent yourself, try again, and still fail countless more times, and eventually, when you succeed, it's euphoric. So much of the modern world can make you feel like a failure, someone who just never seems to get any better. You get laid off and spend months on the job market knowing you're highly qualified and experienced, yet still no one offers you a job or even an interview. Or you go on dozens of dates, being honest and authentic and open your heart to the possibility of love, and another rejection, no reason. Trying to buy a house, pay off your debts, lose weight, save money, and a dozen other major goals most people probably have can all feel impossible to achieve sometimes. There's usually no one there to help you, explain why you didn't succeed, or give you any notes on what you should do next. It can be maddening and discouraging to the highest degree. But roguelike games can give us a semblance of that apprenticeship, where the game is made in such a way that it acts as a master that will not give in to your demands, yet will not let you give up on your own attempts. These games don't shit on you for trying, they encourage you. It's alright, try again, they say. Here are some tools that might help next time. You must learn the process from a trainer endlessly willing to work with you, and when you finally get it right, whether it's memorizing enemy attack patterns, their resistance weaknesses, their health bars, or just grinding through brutally difficult challenges until you're leveled up enough to defeat the boss, I mean, I can see how people love this shit. And I can see the enormous need that many people have for this kind of apprenticeship and how rewarding and fulfilling it can be. You may think there are very few, if any, real life skills that these kinds of games can teach you. Look, there's no shortage of self-help gurus who might watch a video like this and shit on anyone watching, condescendingly convincing you that video games are a waste of time and that you should spend more time elsewhere. I disagree. There's a reason I decided to make a gaming channel even though I have no experience in video editing. It's because video games are important and I want to talk about it. Video games can teach you things in ways nothing else can. They can inspire you, encourage you, and remind you that there's still hope, that there's deep meaning out there through their polygonal, pixelated characters and storylines. For me, roguelike video games have helped me be a far more patient and measured person. I love turn-based RPGs, and for my money, the Darkest Dungeon games are the most brutally difficult games in the entire genre. This means that to beat them, you have to lose, die, and fail a lot. If you don't, you're not going to win. It is only by overcoming your own doubt, lack of preparation, and discouragement that you can ever hope to get a win. When things seem terrible, when it feels like there's no answer to the crushing set of circumstances you're faced with, these kind of games can give you hope and remind you that you're only a couple good dice rolls or critical hits away from surviving a task that might seem impossible to overcome right now. These games teach discipline and focus in its own way. Darkest Dungeon 2 taught me to pay extreme attention to detail because in that game, one debuff, one single misread, one wrong item equipped, one character out of place, that can all mean certain death immediately. I find that it's easier to be this methodical and detail-oriented in my own real life, with my kids, with my job, with myself, my thinking. Something else that roguelites and fighting games in particular have taught me is poise. In the moment, it's just you and your opponent, and nerves play a big part of your next move. It might seem a little silly, but these kinds of games have taught me how to remain calm, not panic, and think clearly in the face of unexpected obstacles and problems. I think overall, these games have just taught me how to keep going, and that even if I die in my run, I made progress as long as I learned something. In the game, this might be learning an enemy attack pattern, or discovering an unknown weakness, or learning the advantages of going one way over the other, and always ensure that I'll have a better chance at success next time. In real life, these lessons have become even more important and impactful in my life. I was recently laid off and spent the next 6 months searching for a job where I had 40 interviews with 20 different companies and still couldn't get a job. It was easy to give in to despair and frustration, but I got through it. Eventually, I found a job again. And when I was laid off from that job a few months later, I had learned something from my previous run. It taught me to be more focused, poised, and driven. If I could get a job before, I could do it again. And I have a new one now. I don't want to blow things out of proportion here, but I think there's an undeniable power and identity that these games can give you if you let them. When we can't find masters in real life who are willing to teach us important skills, we can turn to video games like Darkest Dungeon, Dark Souls, and other brutally difficult games that force you to become great and don't apologize or bend to your whims when you get frustrated or discouraged, and teach you how to be better in your own life. Being an apprentice is a powerful way to learn, grow, and become someone that is valuable to society and to those around you. And while you might not find a master in real life to teach you, there's plenty you can learn from the right video games, if only you're willing to stick it out and let yourself be transformed. Thanks for watching. And if you want to watch more videos like this, be sure to click that subscribe button.